The huge space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark between the stars. It was bigger than most cities and filled with beings from all across the galaxy. Ambassador Jake Morrison looked out at the stars through the station's clear dome. But his mind was on the meeting that was about to begin. Jake was not alone. Colonel Lisa Parks stood beside him, her soldier's training clear in how she held herself. Dr. Alex Turner, their expert on alien cultures, checked his notes one more time. The three humans were about to face something that had never happened before in galactic history. They walked into the main meeting room, and Jake felt small. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 47 different alien species. Each species needed different air to breathe, different gravity to feel comfortable, and different light to see properly. The room's computers managed all of this, creating dozens of small perfect environments inside one big space. Elder Zixthara spoke first. He was a Zephyrian, looking like a giant insect inside a special suit that kept him alive in the station's atmosphere. His voice came through speakers that changed his alien sounds into words Jake could understand. "The Assembly welcomes the human delegation," Zixthara said, but his tone was not welcoming at all. "We are here to discuss the human problem." Jake felt Lisa tense beside him. Calling humanity a problem was an insult, and everyone in the room knew it. But Jake had expected this. He had studied these aliens for months, learning their histories and their ways of thinking. "We thank the Assembly for this chance to talk," Jake replied calmly. "The Terran Federation comes here in peace, hoping to understand each other better." "Aye." Low sound came from the Nelari section of the room. The Nelari were beings made of gas, floating in special containers. The room's translation system told Jake that the sound meant they were laughing at him, but not in a friendly way. "Commander." Krelinox spoke next. He was a Vorthik made of living crystal that sang when he moved. His people controlled much of the galaxy's trade and money. "Peace is an interesting word coming from a species that has taken 17 star systems in just 10 years, he said. Doctor. Turner leaned forward. "Those systems were empty," he said. "No one lived there, and no one had claimed them. We followed all the rules for expansion that the galaxy agreed on long ago." "Rules made when your species was stuck on one planet," Zixthara shot back. "The galaxy has watched your expansion with growing fear. You grow too fast." Jake studied the aliens around him. The Zephyrians had once expanded across space, conquering system after system with their organized armies. The Vorthek had built their empire by controlling trade routes and resources. The Nelari had gained power by working through other species, pulling strings from the shadows. All of them had become comfortable with their power, Jake realized. They had divided the galaxy among themselves long ago, and now they saw humanity's growth as a threat to their comfortable arrangements. Speaker Vashtai, the Nelari representative, shimmered in their gas container. "We have studied your expansion patterns," they said. "Your species shows no signs of slowing down. This threatens the peace we have built." "Peace built on keeping younger species weak," Lisa said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have read your histories. Each of you expanded aggressively when you were young, then tried to stop others from doing the same once you had what you wanted." The reaction was immediate and angry. The Zephyrians made clicking sounds of rage. The Vorthik sang harsh notes that hurt to hear. The Nalari's gas forms swirled with fury. But Jake noticed that some of the smaller species stayed quiet, watching carefully. "The human delegation will not use such language," Zixthara commanded. "We are not here to discuss ancient history. We are here to discuss current threats." "Threats," Jake repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Is that what you think we are? A threat to be destroyed, rather than neighbors to be welcomed?" "That depends on what you do next," Commander Krelinox replied. The meeting went on for hours. One by one, different species stood up to complain about. Human expansion. The Meridian Collective said humans were mining too close to their space. The synthetic consciousness worried about human computers becoming too smart. The Aquatic Alliance did not like how humans changed planets to make them suitable for human life. Jake answered each complaint with facts and legal arguments, but he could feel the weight of their combined hostility. These aliens had not called this meeting to listen to humanity's side. They had already decided that human expansion was a threat that needed to be stopped as the session finally ended. Jake gathered his papers carefully. The message was clear. Humanity was being judged not for breaking any laws, but for the crime of being successful. The galaxy's old powers had decided that human growth threatened their dominance, and they planned to end it. Tomorrow we will discuss specific solutions, Elder Zixthara announced. The Assembly expects the humans to come prepared with concrete proposals for limiting their species' expansion. Jake nodded politely, but his mind was already working through what this meant. The galaxy was not seeking compromise or negotiation. They were demanding surrender. And Jake knew exactly how humanity would respond to such demands. As the three humans left the chamber, Lisa moved closer to Jake. "They have already made their decision," she said quietly. "Yes," Jake agreed. "The question is whether they understand what they are really asking for." Dr. Turner looked back at the meeting room, where alien delegates were already forming small groups to talk among themselves. They think they are dealing with a typical expanding species. They do not understand that humanity is different. "No," Jake said, and for the first time, he smiled slightly. "They do not understand, but they are about to learn." The three humans walked through the station's corridors, past aliens who watched them with suspicious eyes. Word of the meeting's tone was already spreading through the station. The galaxy's most powerful species had made their position clear. Humanity would submit to their authority or face the consequences. But Jake Morrison carried a secret that none of the aliens suspected. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for years. They had studied galactic history, learned from the mistakes of other species, and developed capabilities that the Assembly could not imagine. Tomorrow, the Assembly would present their demands. They expected humanity to accept whatever terms. They offered, grateful for the chance to avoid destruction. They were about to discover that humans had never been particularly good at meeting expectations. As Jake reached his quarters, he activated a secure communication system that would carry his report back to Earth. The message was simple. The Assembly had revealed their true intentions, and humanity's response was ready to begin. The galaxy thought they were about to witness the submission of an upstart species. Instead, they were about to learn why humanity had never needed their permission to exist among the stars. The real education was about to begin, and the Assembly would be the students this time. The second day of the Assembly felt more like a trial than a meeting. Jake Morrison sat between Lisa Park and Alex Turner, noticing how their seats had been moved slightly farther from the center of the room. It was a small change, but the message was clear. Humanity's status had been reduced overnight. Elder Zixthara stood up, his insect-like form gleaming under the room's lights. "The Assembly has reached a decision about the human expansion problem," he announced. His voice carried a tone of finality that made Jake's stomach tighten. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Human territory was marked in red, like drops of blood spreading across space. Jake studied the map carefully, noting not just what was shown, but what the display was meant to make him feel. "First," Zixthara continued, "humanity will immediately stop all expansion activities. No new colonies, no new mining operations, no new territorial claims. This ban will last forever." The red markers on the map began to pulse, as if counting down to their death. Commander Krellinox, the crystal being, shifted his massive form and made musical sounds that the translation system said meant approval. Second, the Zephyrian continued, humanity will give up all claims to the following systems. 17 of the red markers suddenly turned yellow, including some of humanity's most important and valuable colonies. These systems will be given to assembly members according to our prior agreements. Lisa's hand tightened on her datapad, but she kept her face calm. Jake made notes about which systems they wanted, recognizing that each one was strategically important. The assembly was not just trying to contain humanity. They were demanding the surrender of key positions that would leave human space vulnerable to future attacks. Third, Zixtara announced, all human expansion activities will be watched by the assembly. Future colonization requests must be submitted to this body for approval with full disclosure of intended activities and resource use. The meaning was staggering. Jake realized that the assembly was essentially demanding that humanity become a vassal state, subject to the whims of the established galactic powers. It was a return to the old system of control, with humanity relegated to the role of a junior partner at best. Commander Krellinox rose from his crystal throne, his massive form casting rainbow lights across the room. The assembly recognizes that these requirements represent significant changes to human operations, he rumbled. However, the alternative is far worse. The Vorthic Economic Council has prepared a comprehensive sanctions package, he continued, and new displays appeared showing trade routes and resource flows. Human access to galactic markets will be cut off. All economic agreements will be ended. Your species will find itself alone and unable to access the resources necessary for continued expansion. Jake studied the economic projections, noting their thoroughness and cruel efficiency. The Vorthic had clearly spent significant effort mapping human economic vulnerabilities, identifying every possible pressure point that could be exploited. Speaker Vashtai, the gaseous Nellari, shimmered as they prepared to speak. The Nellari Collective has conducted extensive analysis of human expansion patterns, they announced. Your species' rate of growth is mathematically impossible to sustain. If allowed to continue, human territory will overlap with established claims within 50 years. The display changed again, showing projected expansion paths that painted human growth as an inevitable threat to every established power. Jake recognized the projections as technically accurate but deliberately misleading, designed to present human expansion as aggressive rather than natural. The Aquatic Alliance supports all proposed measures, announced Representative Kethmara, her water-filled suit glowing with bioluminescent patterns. Human terraforming activities have disrupted 3 water world ecosystems, despite claims of environmental care. The synthetic consciousness agrees, added Node 7, its mechanical form clicking and whirring as it processed data. Human artificial intelligence development poses potential risks to existing synthetic life forms. One by one, the assembly members voiced their support for the proposed restrictions. Jake noted that the smaller species remained mostly silent, their body language suggesting discomfort with the proceedings but unwillingness to challenge the dominant powers. Dr. Turner leaned closer to Jake. They are not just demanding submission, he whispered. They are demanding the dismantling of our technological and economic advantages. Jake nodded slightly. The Assembly's demands went beyond simple territorial restrictions. They were seeking to prevent humanity from achieving the kind of technological and economic independence that had allowed other species to dominate galactic affairs. Elder Zixtara gestured for silence. The Assembly has spoken with one voice, he announced. These requirements are not open to negotiation. They represent the minimum acceptable terms for continued human participation in galactic civilization. The threat was clear. Submit to these demands or face isolation and potential military action. Jake felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his response would determine not just the outcome of these negotiations, but the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The Terran Federation requests time to consider these proposals, Jake said carefully. Such significant changes to our civilization's development require proper consultation with our government. Time is a luxury that circumstances no longer permit, Commander Krellinox replied. The assembly requires an answer within 24 hours. Jake stood slowly, his movement creating a ripple of attention throughout the chamber. Ambassador Morrison will consult with his government, he announced formally. The human delegation will provide its response at tomorrow's session. As the session ended, Jake could feel the weight of expectation from the assembled species. They clearly expected humanity to give in, to accept the role of a lesser species grateful for whatever scraps the established powers chose to provide. But Jake knew something the assembly did not understand. Humanity had never been particularly good at accepting ultimatums. And they were about to discover just how poorly humans responded to threats. They really believe we will just roll over, Lisa said quietly as they left the chamber. Most species would, Alex replied. Faced with overwhelming odds, the rational choice is submission. Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Then it is fortunate that humanity has never been particularly rational. The three humans made their way through the station's corridors, past groups of aliens who watched them with mixture of curiosity and contempt. The galaxy's decision had been made. Humanity would submit, or be forced to submit. But as Jake activated his secure communication system to report back to Earth, he carried knowledge that would change everything. The assembly believed they were negotiating from a position of absolute strength. They were about to learn that strength was relative, and humanity had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone imagined. The ultimatum had been delivered. Tomorrow, humanity would deliver their response, and the galaxy would discover that some species were not as easily intimidated as others. The real test was about to begin. The third day of the assembly opened with tension, so thick you could cut it with a knife. Representatives from 47 species had gathered to witness what many thought was obvious. Humanity would accept the galaxy's demands. Jake Morrison entered the chamber with Colonel Lisa Park and Dr. Alex Turner, their calm faces hiding the storm of preparation that had happened during the night's secret communications with Earth. Elder Zixthara stood up immediately, his environmental suit reflecting the chamber's lights and patterns that looked like satisfaction. The assembly recognizes Ambassador Morrison, he announced. We await humanity's response to our requirements. Jake stood slowly, his movements careful and measured. The chamber fell silent, 47 species focusing their attention on the small human delegation. He had spent the night reviewing not just the assembly's demands, but the bigger picture of what this moment meant for humanity's future. Honored delegates, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. The Terran Federation has carefully considered the proposals presented by this assembly. We have talked with our government, our military leaders, and our people. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the chamber. Commander Krellinox's crystal form shifted slightly, creating musical tones that the translation system side meant anticipation. The assembly has asked that humanity stop all expansion activities, surrender 17 established colonies, and submit to galactic oversight of our civilization's development, Jake continued. These demands have been presented as non-negotiable requirements for our continued participation in galactic civilization. Speaker Vashtai's gas form rippled with what appeared to be satisfaction. The Nilari representative had clearly expected this moment, the formal acceptance of humanity's lesser status. The Terran Federation's response is simple, Jake announced, his voice gaining strength. We respectfully decline. The chamber exploded in noise. The Zephyrians made angry clicking sounds. The Vortex sang harsh notes of fury, and the Nalaris Gas forms swirled with rage. Several smaller species stayed quiet, but Jake noticed their careful attention to the exchange, their body language suggesting something between surprise and approval. Elder Zixthara's environmental suit flared with emergency lights as he struggled to restore order. "The human delegation cannot simply decline," he announced. "The assembly has spoken with one voice. These requirements are not optional." Jake remained standing, his composure unshaken by the hostile reaction. "With respect, Elder Zixthara, the Terran Federation has broken no galactic laws. Our expansion has been conducted according to established rules. Our colonies have been built on empty worlds with no prior claims. We have engaged in peaceful trade and diplomatic relations with all species. Your expansion threatens galactic stability," Commander Krellinox rumbled, his crystal form vibrating with barely contained aggression. "The Assembly has the right to prevent such threats. The Assembly has the right to govern its own members," Jake replied calmly. "Humanity is not a member of this Assembly. We are not subject to its authority. We are a free civilization with the right to determine our own future." The implications of his words sent shockwaves through the chamber. Jake was not just rejecting the Assembly's demands. He was rejecting their right to make such demands in the first place. Dr. Turner leaned forward slightly. "The Terran Federation notes that many species in this chamber expanded aggressively during their own development phases," he added. "The Zephyrians conquered 43 systems during their expansion period. The Vorthik absorbed 12 smaller civilizations. The Nelari displaced 6 species from their traditional territories. Yet humanity is condemned for peaceful expansion into empty space. Those expansions occurred under different circumstances," Elder Zixthara protested. "The galaxy was younger, less stable. The current system maintains peace. The current system maintains the dominance of established powers," Lisa said quietly, her military training evident in her assessment. "You are not seeking to prevent conflict. You are seeking to prevent competition." Jake raised his hand for silence. "The Terran Federation has one final statement for this assembly," he announced. "We came here in good faith, seeking understanding and cooperation. Instead, we found ultimatums and threats. We sought dialogue and received demands for submission." He gathered his materials with careful precision, his actions creating a moment of deep silence in the chamber. "Humanity will continue to expand, explore, and develop according to our own values and interests. We will respect the legitimate territorial claims of other species, as we have always done. We will engage in peaceful trade and diplomacy with any species that wishes to do so." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "But we will not submit to the authority of this assembly. We will not surrender our colonies to satisfy your territorial ambitions. And we will not limit our development to ease your fears of competition." The chamber exploded in outrage. Species representatives rose from their seats, their various forms of communication creating a babel of anger and indignation. Through it all, Jake remained standing, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding him. "The Assembly will not tolerate this defiance," Elder Zixthara announced, his synthesized voice cutting through the noise. "There will be consequences for this decision." Jake nodded politely. "We understand that you may choose to view our sovereignty as a threat," he replied. "That is your right. But it is also our right to defend ourselves against any aggression that results from your displeasure." He turned toward the exit, his companions falling into step beside him. "We thank the Assembly for this opportunity to clarify our position," he said over his shoulder. "The Terran Federation wishes you well in your future endeavors." The 3 humans walked toward the chamber's exit, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Jake could feel the weight of 47 species' attention focused on their departure, could sense the mixture of shock, anger, and fear that their decision had created. As they reached the exit, Jake paused and turned back to face the assembly. One final time. One last thought, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio system. You may wish to consider why humanity felt confident enough to walk away from this table. We did not make this decision lightly, and we did not make it from a position of weakness. The chamber door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving 47 species to think about what humanity's departure meant. For the first time in galactic history, a species had walked away from the Assembly's demands, choosing independence over submission. They are going to see this as a declaration of war, Lisa said quietly as they walked toward their transport. Probably, Jake agreed. But they would have found an excuse for war eventually anyway. At least this way, we choose the terms of engagement. Dr. Turner glanced back toward the chamber they had just left. The smaller species looked almost relieved, he observed. They have been living under the Assembly's control for centuries. Jake smiled, but there was steel in his expression. Then maybe it is time someone showed them that the Assembly is not as powerful as they pretend to be. As their transport carried them away from Nexus Prime, Jake felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The easy part was over. Humanity had made its position clear, had drawn the line that would not be crossed. Now came the hard part, proving that they had the strength to back up their words. The galaxy was about to learn that some species could not be intimidated, could not be bought, and could not be forced to submit. Humanity had walked away from the Assembly's table not out of foolishness or pride, but because they had never needed the galaxy's permission to exist. The real education was about to begin. The news of humanity's walkout spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of the Assembly's emergency session, communication networks carried the shocking news to every major world. For the first time in recorded history, a species had rejected the Assembly's authority and walked away from the negotiating table. Sam Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's flagship, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. The massive warship hung in space near the Kepler Junction, one of the most important hyperspace routes in human-controlled space. Around her, the ship's crew worked with quiet efficiency, their training evident in every precise movement. Admiral, called Lieutenant Commander Kate Ryan from the communication station. We are receiving reports from deep space monitoring stations. The Zephyrian fleet is mobilizing at Sector 7-7-Alpha. Sam nodded grimly. The Zephyrians had always been the most military-minded of the major powers, their highly organized society capable of rapid military deployment. If they were mobilizing, it meant the Assembly had decided to back their ultimatum with force. What is the composition of their fleet? Sam asked, moving to the tactical display. Early reports suggest 200 vessels, Admiral, replied Commander Jake Martinez from the tactical station, including at least 30 heavy cruisers and their flagship, the Nexus of Worlds. Sam studied the display, her mind automatically calculating vectors and capabilities. The Zephyrian fleet was formidable, but it was just the beginning. If the Assembly was truly committed to forcing humanity's submission, they would bring everything. They had. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Ryan called again. We are receiving additional reports. The Vorthic Economic Council has frozen all human assets in their territory. They are also jamming commercial communications between human colonies and neutral systems. The economic warfare was beginning, exactly as predicted. Sam had spent years studying galactic military doctrine, and she knew that the established powers preferred to win through economic pressure rather than direct confrontation. But humanity's rejection of the Assembly's authority had apparently pushed them beyond such measured responses. Commander Martinez, Sam ordered, start communication with all fleet commanders. I want a full tactical briefing in 30 minutes. As the crew scrambled to comply, Sam reflected on the events that had led to this moment. The intelligence reports had been flooding in since Ambassador Morrison's dramatic walkout, painting picture of a galaxy in turmoil. The Assembly's member species were mobilizing not just military forces, but economic and political pressure designed to isolate humanity completely. The Nalari had begun jamming human communications. Their gas forms infiltrating communication relays and disrupting quantum networks. The Aquatic Alliance had severed all trade agreements, cutting off access to rare minerals found only in water-world environments. Even smaller species that had previously maintained neutral relations with humanity were being pressured to choose sides. Admiral, Commander Martinez announced. Fleet commanders are standing by for briefing. Sam moved to the central holographic display, where the faces of 12 human fleet commanders appeared in projection. Each represented a different aspect of humanity's military strength: deep space patrol fleets, planetary defense forces, rapid response squadrons, and specialized task forces. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam began, as you are all aware, the situation has escalated beyond diplomatic resolution. The Assembly has interpreted our walkout as a declaration of war, and they are responding accordingly. Admiral Lisa Chun, commanding the Outer Rim Patrol Fleet, leaned forward in her projection. What is our current tactical assessment, Sam? The Zephyrians are mobilizing their main battle fleet, Sam replied, highlighting the relevant systems. On the display, approximately 200 vessels, including their most advanced capital ships. Intelligence suggests they are planning to strike at the Kepler Junction within 72 hours. Admiral Marcus Brown, commander of the Planetary Defense Forces, frowned. The Kepler Junction is our most strategic position. If they take it, they can cut off communications and supply lines to half our colonies. That is exactly their plan. Sam confirmed. But the Zephyrians are not our only concern. The Vorthek are implementing economic warfare tactics, and the Nalari are disrupting our communications networks. We are facing a coordinated assault on multiple fronts. The assembled commanders studied the tactical displays, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. Humanity had always known that their rapid expansion would eventually bring them into conflict with the established powers. But few had expected such a comprehensive response. What are our orders, Admiral? Asked Commander Sarah Mitchell, whose rapid response squadrons were positioned throughout human space. Sam paused, considering her words carefully. Our orders are to defend human space and human interests against all threats. The Assembly has made it clear that they consider our very existence a threat to galactic stability. They are not seeking to contain us. They are seeking to make us submit. She highlighted several key systems on the display. The enemy expects us to fight a defensive war, falling back to protect our core worlds while they systematically destroy our outer colonies. They believe that superior numbers and established supply lines will give them victory. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. I take it we are not going to give them what they expect? No, Sam replied, her voice carrying a note of steel. We are going to give them something they never expected. The Assembly has made one critical error in their calculations. She expanded the display to show the entire galaxy, with human territory highlighted in blue and Assembly forces in red. They assume that humanity will fight according to their rules, using their tactics and their definitions of acceptable warfare. They have spent centuries perfecting a system of limited conflicts and negotiated settlements. Sam's expression grew harder. But humanity has never been particularly good at following other people's rules. We are going to show them exactly why. Ambassador Morrison was confident enough to walk away from their table. The assembled commanders leaned forward, recognizing the shift in their admiral's tone. This was no longer about defensive strategies or damage control. This was about demonstrating why humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. The Assembly believes they are facing a typical expanding species, Sam continued. They expect us to be intimidated by their numbers and their ancient authority. They are about to discover that they are not dealing with a typical species. She activated a new display showing defensive positions and fleet movements that had been prepared in absolute secrecy. Phase 1 of our response begins in 18 hours. By the time the assembly realizes what is happening, it will be too late to change their approach. Admiral Brown studied the displays with growing amazement. How long have we been preparing? For this? Years, Sam replied simply. We knew this day would come eventually. The assembly's reaction was predictable, and we have been ready for it. As the briefing concluded and the commanders signed off to prepare their forces, Sam remained on the bridge, studying the tactical displays. Around her, the crew of the Defiance worked with quiet determination, their confidence evident in every action. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had walked away from the assembly's demands. It was not defiance born of desperation or foolish pride. It was the calculated decision of a species that had prepared for exactly this moment. The assembly had mobilized to teach humanity a lesson about the consequences of defying galactic authority. Instead, they were about to receive an education in why humanity had never needed their permission in the first place. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Ryan reported, "We are receiving final confirmations from all defense networks. All systems. Report ready." Sam nodded, feeling the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Then let us show them what humanity is truly capable of. The real war was about to begin. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace at the Kepler Junction in perfect formation. 200 vessels arranged in a classical battle array that had dominated galactic warfare for 3,000 years. Elder Zixthara stood on the command bridge of the Nexus of Worlds, his environmental suit reflecting the tactical displays that showed human space, spread before them like a map waiting to be conquered. Fleet Admiral, reported Sub-Commander Yithkara, her voice carrying the precise tones of military efficiency. All vessels report ready for engagement. The junction appears to be lightly defended. Zixthara studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human defensive positions were exactly what Doctrine predicted. A handful of patrol ships and orbital defense platforms, clearly positioned for a fighting withdrawal toward the inner systems. It was a textbook response from a weaker force facing overwhelming odds. "Begin the attack protocol," he ordered. "Destroy the defensive installations and establish control of the junction. Once we control this position, we can systematically isolate and reduce the human colonies." The Zephyrian fleet began its advance, weapon systems powering up and shields activating. Similar attacks were being launched simultaneously at a dozen other strategic points throughout human space. The assembly had committed to a comprehensive campaign designed to demonstrate the consequences of defying galactic authority. But as the fleet approached the junction, something unexpected happened. The human patrol ships, instead of falling back or requesting reinforcement, simply vanished. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, as if they had never existed at all. "Sub-Commander," Zixthara called sharply, "explain the disappearance of the human vessels." "Unknown, Fleet Admiral," Yithkara replied, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "They did not enter hyperspace. They did not explode. They simply disappeared." Before Zixthara could respond, the space around the Kepler junction began to shimmer. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly revealed itself to be something else entirely. A massive defensive network that had been completely invisible to their sensors. Stealth fields, Zixthara breathed, his environmental suit systems highlighting the emerging threats. They have been hiding their true defensive capabilities. The human defense network was unlike anything in galactic military doctrine. Instead of traditional orbital platforms and patrol fleets, humanity had constructed a web of interconnected defensive nodes that had been completely undetectable until activation. Each node was small, mobile, and capable of independent operation. But together, they formed a defensive system of unprecedented sophistication. Fleet Admiral, Ithkara reported, her voice rising with alarm. We are detecting weapons signatures unlike anything in our databases. These are not traditional energy, weapons or kinetic systems. The Human Defense Network opened fire, and the Zephyrian fleet discovered that their opponents had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone had imagined. The weapons that struck their ships were based on principles that made traditional shielding and armor largely useless. Ships that had been designed to withstand conventional galactic warfare found themselves overwhelmed by technology that operated on entirely different principles. How is this possible? Zixthara demanded, watching as his fleet's front line was systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The answer came from an unexpected source, a human transmission that cut through all their communication systems with effortless precision. Admiral Sam Carter's image appeared on the Zephyrian command bridge, her calm expression a stark contrast to the chaos erupting around the alien fleet. Elder Zixthara, she said politely, I am Admiral Carter of the United Earth Systems Defense Force. I wanted to personally explain what you are experiencing. Zixthara activated his own communication system, his environmental suit's projectors creating a response signal. Admiral Carter, your defensive capabilities are unexpected, but numbers will ultimately prevail. The Assembly has committed sufficient forces to overwhelm any defense. Sam's smile was genuinely warm, as if she was discussing a minor misunderstanding, rather than a galactic war. I am afraid you are operating under a fundamental misconception, Elder. You believe you are facing a defensive battle against a weaker force. In reality, you are about to discover why humanity walked away from your assembly with such confidence. The tactical displays on the Nexus of Worlds suddenly went dark, replaced by a comprehensive view of human space that showed the true scope of humanity's preparations. The colonies that the Assembly had dismissed as vulnerable outposts were revealed to be nodes in a defensive network that spanned dozens of systems. The patrol fleets that had seemed inadequate were shown to be mobile components of a military system that had been designed specifically to counter traditional galactic warfare. You see, Sam continued, the Assembly made a critical error in your threat assessment. You assumed that humanity would fight according to your rules, using your tactics and your definitions of acceptable warfare. You have spent centuries perfecting a system of limited conflicts and negotiated settlements. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. But humanity has never been particularly good at following other people's rules. We have been preparing for this conflict since our first contact with galactic civilization. Every colony you thought was vulnerable, every system you considered strategically unimportant, every defensive position you dismissed as inadequate was designed to lure you into exactly this position. Zixthara felt a chill that had nothing to do with his environmental suit's temperature controls. You are suggesting that humanity planned this war from the beginning? Not planned, Sam corrected, prepared. We knew that our expansion would eventually bring us into conflict with the established powers. We studied your histories, your military doctrines, your political systems. We understood that you would eventually demand our submission, and we prepared accordingly. The Human Defense Network continued its systematic dismantling of the Zephyrian fleet, each engagement demonstrating technological superiority that went beyond mere advancement. The weapons and tactics being employed suggested a fundamental reimagining of warfare itself. Your fleets are impressive, Sam acknowledged, watching as another wave of Zephyrian vessels found themselves outmaneuvered by defensive systems that seemed to predict their every move. But they are designed to fight other galactic civilizations. They are not designed to fight humanity. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out at every point where assembly forces had expected easy victories. The Vorthak economic assault had triggered hidden human economic networks that revealed the true extent of humanity's integration into galactic commerce. The Nelari communication jamming had activated backup systems that operated on principles the gaseous beings had never encountered. On the bridge of the Nexus of Worlds, Sub-Commander Yethkara reported the impossible. Fleet Admiral, we are receiving surrender requests from our own vessels. They are requesting permission to withdraw from combat. Zixthara's environmental suit flared with emergency indicators. A Zephyrian fleet requesting withdrawal was unprecedented in 3 millennia of military history. But as he watched the tactical displays, he began to understand why his commanders were making such requests. The human defensive systems were not simply destroying enemy vessels. They were demonstrating complete technological superiority while offering opportunities for withdrawal. It was a calculated display of power designed to send a message. Humanity could destroy the Assembly's forces completely, but chose not to. Admiral Carter, Zixthara said, his voice heavy with defeat. What are your terms? Sam's expression remained calm, professional. Our terms are simple, Elder Zixthara. The Assembly will acknowledge humanity's right to exist as a sovereign civilization. You will cease all economic warfare and military aggression against human interests. And you will respect our territorial claims according to the same laws that govern all other species. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. In return, humanity will continue to honor existing territorial claims and engage in peaceful trade and diplomacy with any species that wishes to do so. We seek coexistence, not domination. And if the Assembly refuses these terms? Zixthara asked, though he already knew the answer. Sam gestured to the tactical displays, showing the systematic neutralization of Assembly forces across multiple star systems. Then you will discover that humanity's patience has limits. We walked away from your table because we no longer needed your permission to exist. We defended ourselves because you forced us to demonstrate our capabilities. If you continue to threaten human interests, we will be forced to take more permanent measures. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not seeking to conquer or dominate the galaxy. They were simply refusing to be conquered or dominated themselves. But their technological capabilities suggested that conquest would be possible if they chose that path. The Assembly will need time to consider these terms, Zixthara said, his pride warring with the reality of his situation. Of course, Sam replied graciously. You have 72 hours to recall all Assembly forces from human space and issue a formal statement acknowledging our sovereignty. After that, we will